I'm going to route around in different directions. Hopefully everyone can grab one. Oop. Is that better? Okay, right in front of my mouth. All right, well, thank you guys all for turning out. I know the turnout is higher because of the topic of milfoil management and herbicide use in the lake. So I wanted to provide a little bit of an overview for some background, and then I'm happy to answer your questions that you have. So, bring the mic right to my phone, my mouth. All right. So just first, a thank you to all of you who are involved in the Pawtuckaway Lake Association's work for invasive species. You guys have led the prevention, early detection, and rapid response initiatives for invasive species around the lake. And those are the buzzwords: prevention, early detection, rapid response. And those are really important because they all go hand in hand in trying to mitigate the impacts of invasive species. The prevention comes in with your Lake Coast program and your signage at your boat launches. The early detection is all of the weed watchers who are either officially weed watchers or those of you who just look at stuff when you're out and wonder what it is and ask for an identification. And the rapid response is what's been happening since 2015 when variable milfoil was first found in the lake. That's 8 years ago, and that's a pretty long time. And luckily, to date, we've been able to continue to monitor it, and then it's been sufficiently managed by diving by many people, volunteers. Originally, some state divers were involved in the hand pulling of it. So all of those things go hand in hand to try to help prevent the widespread expansion of milfoil in the lake and the prevention of other things from coming in the lake. I work with some water bodies that have 6 different invasive species in them, and that is pretty bad. Milfoil is bad enough, but other things mixed in with that is pretty awful. So a big thank you to all of you guys, and also just a recognition of the work with this really cool kit. I've never seen anything like this before in all of the different groups I go to. So kudos to the kids for putting this together. My only suggestion was to put Pawtuckaway Lake on it so that there's some ownership there. But I did take pictures of the table and the kids, and I'm going to shamelessly broadcast that to all of you.
Awesome! Woo!
So I might insert a Pawtuckaway Lake in there. So, unfortunately, when I printed these out on the back side of the copy, the map is really crappy. So I'm going to email a colored map to the Lake Association to post on their website so you have a better reference of the areas that I'm talking about so that that will be posted. But in general, there are lots of areas of milfoil growth around the lake, mostly a lot of the finger coves or the tips of the finger coves all around the lake, which you have a lot of. And then there are other areas of more expansive growth that have been found in more open areas like the State Park Beach, and then the town beach more recently, and then other areas. So milfoil went initially from maybe a 5-foot by 5-foot patch off 4th Island to multiple locations around the lake, despite the efforts that have been used to date with the divers, and then I believe, I don't know if it's already started, the diver-assisted suction harvesting trial, not yet, okay. So there will be a stepped-up version of diving, which I'll talk about in a second. But a little bit about milfoil first. The plant can grow an inch a day from, probably May through September is the prime time for growth. The plants can get 15 or 16 feet tall. A couple inches of stem floating around can create a new plant. And then plants where they're rooted can send out runners and new plants can come up. So we're fighting the milfoil in a lot of different ways because it has really good adaptive means of reproduction. In addition to that, if the plant tops out at the surface, it will produce a spike of flowers with seeds that are the size of pepper grains. So those will litter around the area, and the seeds, and this is a quote from a researcher that we've worked with, are like chia pets. They reproduce really quickly and will germinate really quickly. So milfoil is very adaptive. and that's why it's problematic. We have milfoil in over 80 water bodies in New Hampshire right now. We have 91 infested water bodies in New Hampshire. That's 80 lakes and ponds and 11 river systems around the state. So just for perspective. And we have about 950 lakes and ponds in New Hampshire and about 11,000 miles of river. So that's, about 8% of our water bodies are dealing with some type of infestation. And I manage and work with all of those on different levels. So I'm pretty familiar with the milfoil, unfortunately. The problem for you guys especially is that Pawtuckaway Lake has a lot of really suitable habitat for milfoil growth. A lot of your lake is fairly shallow, and it has sediments that are pretty good for growth. So you could see a lot further expansion of milfoil, possibly to 60 or 70% of the lake in the long term. And that could be quite devastating. You'll definitely notice it at that point, to where only the deep spots might not have milfoil. So that could be the worst case scenario, and we want to try to keep things from getting to the worst case scenario however we can. So next on to management options. How do we manage milfoil? One of the first ways that we intercept it is with diving. And you guys have been diving for a number of years now on different scales, volunteers, state divers, people that come in to do it for you. I also, a step above that is diver-assisted suction harvesting. So it's not sucking the plants out of the lake bottom. It's actually a diver still going in there and removing the root systems of the plant and then feeding it up a suction platform to a containment device topside. So I'm sure all of you have seen the gold rush and the gold digger shows where they've got the gold sleuthing pontoon boat with the suction pumps. That's exactly what it is. So we've had those going around to different lakes for a number of years. So that's like diving on steroids because the divers don't need a dive bag and they can move much more quickly through the system. So we're going to step up that activity on Pawtuckaway Lake to try to deal more with those bigger patches that are cropping up. And that helps divers move more quickly, but it's not an acre a day or anything like that. It's still slow, but hopefully if we add that in, that will help to mitigate some of this bigger area issue that we're dealing with. The next step beyond that, beyond the divers and the diver-assisted suction harvesting, when you get areas that are really thick and big, is herbicide. And the herbicides have evolved over time. I've been with the state for 25 years, and when I first started, we were using a couple different products that weren't great, and you almost had to treat every year. We had some products that you would treat with that were granular, like a pellet. So picture kitty litter, a clay pellet, and it had the herbicide sprayed on it. They put that in the lake, and the herbicide would slowly come off the pellets. The problem with that one was it worked, but it stayed in the lake for 2 to 4 weeks post-treatment, which is less than ideal because use restrictions are in place. A lot of people have black pipes that go into the lake that they use for irrigation or for coming into the houses to shower with or do your dishes with. And we didn't really want an herbicide lingering for too long in the water body. So luckily we've gone beyond that to the product that we're using now for variable milfoil, and that's called Procellacor. And that's the one that you guys may have been hearing about more in terms of use for Pawtuckaway. So, sorry. So when it comes to herbicide treatment, the product that is most useful right now is a liquid formulation, and the herbicide contractors put that in. They have a boat, and then they've got sort of a tank system on the boat that they put the herbicide into, and then they do passes over the beds of milfoil that we delineate for treatment, and that boat subsurface injects the herbicide into the water column of the lake. The plants will take up that herbicide within about 4 to 6 hours. And then any herbicide that's not taken up is usually non-detect by 24 to 48 hours post-treatment. So we don't have herbicide lingering in the lake for 2 to 4 weeks post-treatment anymore. The plants take it up very quickly. In the plant, it translocates from where it's taken up by the shoots and the leaves down to the roots. So it's a complete kill of the plant, roots and shoots. Again, water column is clear within 24 to 48 hours. Some of the other things about Procelicor is that it's a reduced risk herbicide, meaning that the toxicity is lower than the other products that we've been using in the past. And there are generally no use restrictions for the product. So there's technically no swim restriction on the label. It can be used in drinking water supplies, and it can be used for domestic purposes, so showering and doing dishes. You can't irrigate with it because it is an herbicide and it will kill tomato plants and other things, ornamentals. So that's the basic rundown of the herbicide. We started...
How long is this herbicide going to use?
So I'm about to do that. So we started using the herbicide in 2016. We were part of a field trial. Before an herbicide is licensed for use, we were part of a field trial in New Hampshire where we did a limited 1 acre treatment and studied it for the course of 3 years after that. And it worked very well on the variable milfoil. We did see a couple of non-target impacts, and by that I mean impacts to plants that we didn't intend to target. So lilies, white and yellow lilies, and then other pad species like water shield and floating heart are also impacted temporarily. So some people view that as good or bad because some people love it when their native plants are managed. But our goal is not to take anything but the milfoil when we're doing management. So the temporary impact on the pad species, the lilies, is about 6 to 8 weeks post-treatment. They start to come up again, and they usually flower by the end of the season. We want to maintain the structure of the native vegetation in the lake for habitat, for aesthetics, and for a healthy system. So those will start to come back. All the other plants will be completely fine except the milfoil. So after 2016, we studied for a couple more years. Milfoil control was really good in the areas that we treated. By 2018, the product was licensed for use in lakes and ponds. But this herbicide is used in 2 ways. One is it can be used in aquatics for specific plant control, and the other one is that it's used in rice paddies so that it can be used to control pests that target rice plants. So it is used on a food crop in a different formulation, and then a different formulation for the aquatic environment that we proposed that we've been using it in. So in 2018, after this was licensed, we used it in just a couple water bodies, small acreage, small water bodies. And then each year after that, we have been using it in bigger water bodies and in more numbers of water bodies across the state. And to date, we've used Procelicor in over 50 water bodies in New Hampshire. The biggest treatment acreage that we've used it in is 78 acres, and that was up in Balch Lake in Wakefield. And that sounds like a lot of acreage, and it is. We don't usually like to treat that much, but if you look at Balch Lake, it's probably close to 800 acres, so it was a fraction. I think it was 16% of the lake area was actually being treated. We don't like to treat a lot more than that. We like to just only treat a small percentage. So those are the numbers in terms of use. So we've been using it for 5 years. It's been used a little bit longer in the food crop industry, but it's a different formulation there, and it's not comparable in terms of aquatic use. So that's a bit of the history on the Procelicor. The product, anytime we use an herbicide in an aquatic system, it is licensed in the state. It has to be used by licensed applicators. And I have to tell you something that absolutely scares the crap out of me. There are people out there who buy herbicides on their own and put them in the lake across their frontage. And you have to assume that a lot of people think, I'll just add a little bit more and it'll be really good. I'll, clear my beach frontage. And I see this, and we've actually intercepted people having UPS deliveries of product, and then they go out on their pontoon boat and disperse it. So I'm really scared of that because it's unregulated, and the whole more is better approach actually doesn't work really well. So the process, the legal process for doing this is going through the Department of Agriculture to obtain a permit, and then that permit is sent to the Department of Environmental Services, Fish and Game, and Natural Heritage, which is the program that reviews rare, threatened, and endangered species. And then it also gets sent to the Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau. So all of those staff review these permits. And those permits could be for aquatic use, it could be for shorefront use. I think last year you guys had treating around the telephone pole, herbicide treatment. That's also reviewed by that group of individuals. So it's well vetted. And then if a permit is issued, it is issued to the licensed applicator, and the licensed applicator has to do the treatment at a certain dose. And dose is determined by water depth, and more isn't better. We actually treat with as little herbicide as we can get away with for the target plant in that volume of water that we're actually treating. So it's very scientific. It's not like the analogy that I just used of the shorefront property owner going out on their pontoon boat and spreading something in their waterfront. So it's very regulated, and usually the Department of Agriculture is on site to test the product to make sure it's the right product, and then they observe the treatment to make sure it's being done appropriately. So it is highly regulated, and then the Department of Agriculture requires that herbicide residue sampling be done at set intervals after treatment, and an outside laboratory goes and does that sampling, and they collect water samples from the lake to test the concentration in the lake water, and that's how we know the herbicide is gone by 24 to 48 hours after treatment. So that's the general rundown of process, the herbicide, and our series of escalations for when diving no longer works, diver-assisted suction harvesting no longer works, and then we get to the herbicide approach. For context, I was asked early on in 2015 and 2016 if it was appropriate to use herbicides in Pawtuckaway Lake. And I said no. Only time we use herbicides is if there's larger, denser areas of growth. And at the time you didn't have it. So we're not going to treat a milfoil plant in an area like this when we don't need to. That's a diving situation. But if this whole area was full of milfoil and we had a couple more of those, that plant is going to fragment and spread quicker than divers can physically get to it. So that's when we shift into that mode for herbicide treatment. Yeah.
Do you know about the video that has the video loop?
I don't.
If you could tell me about that. Where is it, Jim? Where's your...
Right over on
Oh,
that
I think
table.
I see. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. So apparently there's a video for the underwater shots of milfoil in some of the areas where it's really thick. Town Beach area. I have not come out to survey yet. I'll be out in the next few weeks to survey. And for reference, when I survey, I am in a boat and I have a GPS unit. And I take waypoints, so everything is geo-referenced for where the growth is. And then I pull that all up on a map based on points, and then I determine based on what I saw in the field and density, that's how we determine what we're going to do. So I had to put a permit application in back in January if we wanted to treat this year, because the permit takes a few months to get through the review process and be issued. So a permit has been approved, a permit is at play right now. It doesn't mean we're going to use it. I am not going to force the issue if locally it is unpopular. It is a tool to use if we want to use it, if we need to use it. So there's still a lot of review that's going to happen in the next few weeks. We have a window in June and then a window in August where we could possibly treat. In talking with members of the Lake Association, we were thinking we would hold on a June treatment for now, unless it's completely heinous out there and the milfoil is really bad, and opt for an August treatment if we need to. But we will also amp up the diver-assisted suction harvesting in the interim just to try to see if we can attack it better that way. So we're going to try all of our options. When we do aquatic plant management, it's an integrated adaptive management process. We're dealing with an invasive species that's very adaptive, it grows really quickly, and we can't use set protocols. We have to see what it's doing with survey work, try something, survey again, and if it's not working, shift gears and adapt, just like the species adapts itself. So it's a very orchestrated process that's very deliberately done. And that kind of gives you the run through of where we are now. We have a permit, we'll decide if we need to use it. Only the abutters. So when we do treatment, the abutters will be notified of where the treatment is a couple weeks prior to treatment by the applicator, which is the contractor. And then there are use restrictions on the date of treatment. So I already said that there's no swim restriction, but our Department of Agriculture puts a swim restriction on the treatment zones for the day of treatment so that we don't have people swimming in front of the boat that's trying to do the treatment. Well, swallowing the water isn't the issue because it is, you would have to drink more water than you could contain to reach toxicity with this herbicide in a human body. But it is just a safety factor so that we're not mowing people over with boats when they're in the water. So permits, posters will be posted along shore to notify where the treatment's taking place and its public boat launches. So the notification should be really good in terms of that. But again, that's only if we are doing the treatment. Let's see, what did I miss? So I think I've covered everything that I outlined on the piece of paper. So at this point, I'm happy to... Oh.
I just want to mention one thing about the way Amy has worked with our organization over the years. Every single year, Amy does a long-term milfoil management assessment and with all of her recommendations and all of her conclusions. And every single year, she has said, keep it up. Keep diving, keep hand pulling, you're doing great, that's what I'm telling you to do. This is the first year that she has ever said, I think we might want to consider herbicide. So just so you know, she's been with us all the way, and she's been telling us, just keep hand pulling until now. This didn't come out of nowhere.
And I'm still very much with you. I'm just giving you more options that could suit the needs here. And thank you, I forgot to mention that. There is a written long-term management plan for Pawtuckaway Lake that's specific to your water body. I'm not sure if you guys posted that.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the map that I referenced is actually in that plan, so you can find it on the website in that plan. So you can get a lot more detail, but I just kind of gave you the overview of everything now. So I'm sure I have questions out there that I have not answered, so let's kind of go through. We'll start right here.
Okay.
If you could stand up so that everybody can hear you with the question too.
All right. Now that you've used it in quite a few lakes, can you tell us about the effectiveness in those particular lakes?
So for those of you that didn't hear the question, can I talk about the effectiveness of the herbicide in the lakes that we've used it in? So I'm very surprised at the effectiveness. So like I said, we've used a few products over the years and I've seen a lot of treatments done. And like I said, early on, a lot of the treatments were seasonal because the milfoil was not well controlled. The herbicide, the Procellacor, works really well. And like I said, we've done 50 treatments so far, and many of those have not required retreatment yet. And I'm going to be very careful here because I want to make sure that if you understand it's not ever a one and done when it comes to invasive species. We don't treat and then walk away. We continue monitoring. There will always likely be a place for diving, and I'm not going to rule out not having to ever do another herbicide treatment again. I don't want to mislead anybody. A lot of the lakes that we have are in long-term management, and that's long-term management. Eradication is very difficult to achieve, especially in a lake system like you guys have, where you have all these little wetland fringe areas. The milfoil tucks away in those zones, and if the lake level goes down, milfoil gets succulent like a cactus. It gets thicker and it holds water and it doesn't die even during drawdown. And you guys have seen this because you do big drawdowns every year. So it's not a one and done, but I've seen 2 to 3, 4, and counting years of control as a result of getting the milfoil reduced. The herbicide gives you the ability to get ahead of the growth. Where divers can't keep up with continuing expansion, you can have control of milfoil patches in 2 to 4 weeks post-treatment where the milfoil's gone. Whereas if you have acres of milfoil, the diving is not keeping up with it and they continue to expand. So it's just another tool in the toolbox, but yes, we have had good success in control for multiple years.
Amy, thank you for your involvement over the years with Pawtuckaway Lake. I was involved 25 years. Thank you. A two-part question. Does it make sense to draw down the lake after Labor Day? And I say I'm using that as a time frame. You mentioned that the volume of water, et cetera, to a level that it would take less chemicals to treat the imposed areas. And also at that point in time, there would have to be a fast drawdown, which a lot of people are concerned about the fish quality of life and all of this. So at that point in time, the reason we do not do a fast drawdown is so that the fish can swim naturally downstream. Well, at this time, maybe we pull the plug, let them go downstream. Then we have a lower level for the chemical, which hopefully would use less chemical, save the state some money, and be better for the lake, and we wouldn't have any, people by September, they don't have to water their lawns, they're not looking, it stops to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and we did look at that, not with Priscillacor, but with a different herbicide. The Suncook River in Barnstead has a lot of milfoil, and we tried drawing down and treating in the dry, or also in a reduced volume. The problem is that these herbicides are formulated to work in aquatic environments. So if you draw down, and you guys know your drawdowns, you have a lot of area that's exposed even by a small drawdown. If you expose areas where the milfoil is growing to reduce volume, those areas are not going to be treated. So you're still going to have milfoil around the edges. So I don't think it's a good strategy for this system because of that. The herbicide is just formulated to work better when you have normal water volumes and plant growth as is in that time of year when you're treating.
Thank you, that answered that.
So, this one that we may get, the state is paying for. How long will the state pay, and what does it usually cost?
Yep, good question on funding. So for the first big contracted management, and that could be diving or treatment, so we're going to pay 100% for diving and 100% for herbicide treatment this year. And then after that, we do matching grants. And those grants could be anywhere from 25 to 50% of the cost of management. We have many lakes that are under management, and our funding doesn't grow every year, so we have to parse out the funding that we have equally among the groups. So right now, this year, I'm giving out 52 grants at a 50% level. So after this year, it will be matching grants, but not 100%.
If you do herbicide in one area, does that affect the use of the lake for fertilization throughout the lake?
No, no. So we've done herbicide treatments in very distinct coves on a lot of lakes, and for one good example is Paugus Lake in Laconia, Paugus Bay on Lake Winnipesaukee in Laconia. At the southern end, or the downstream end of Paugus Bay, is a drinking water supply, and the drinking water supply wanted to know if herbicide was coming at them so that they could adjust their treatment protocols for their drinking water supply. And we treated a couple coves half a mile to 2 miles up bay. And I had to sample all the way across the bay to determine if the herbicide was moving. And I never got detections across the bay because the herbicide stays fairly well put like I said, it gets taken up very quickly and it degrades very quickly. The herbicide degrades by sunlight and bacterial activity in the water column. So it really doesn't move. And if it does move, it's so dilute at that point that you have bands of reduced concentration the farther away that you are from the herbicide location. So no, you won't see any movement of the herbicide to other areas outside of the treatment zones. Yes.
Two quick questions. Any sense of any invasion in Burnham's Marsh? And the separate question is, we have one of the lake folks not here, and that's the state park, which is looking to do an expansion. Is there any way of tagging to that expansion a bit of responsibility to the lake as well?
Burnham's Marsh, I'm going to defer to Neil.
We've never dived in there. It's impossible to dive in there. You know, it's a marsh or a swamp. So we've never been in there. We don't have any idea. Oh, sorry. Burnham's Marsh is a marsh. It's a swamp. So we've never dived in Burnham's Marsh. So I don't know what's there. We've never gotten any reports from anybody that there's any milfoil there. We have dived in shallow areas like Fort up at Fundy towards the boat launch. Very shallow, very dark water. Never found any milfoil up there either. But we don't know for sure about Burnham's Marsh. It can grow in marshes. The Beaver Lake output in Derry, they've had a lot of milfoil in marsh area, and they've treated it. We don't know, is the honest answer for Burnham's Marsh.
Thanks, Neil. Relative to the state park, we have been working a lot with the state park for the last several months, and they have taken up a lot of outreach and education activities, putting up signage, special signage for Pawtuckaway and another lake that has a state park on it that has milfoil. So there's been a lot of partnership there. They are also actively interested in helping out with areas around the state park that have milfoil growth, and they've indicated that they could potentially have some funding to help out with areas around the state park so that park users are not going to continue to spread any plants that are growing in that vicinity. I did work with the state park to assess their boat rental area to make sure that there was no milfoil around those locations. I'm going to continue to monitor that so that boats moving in and out of there aren't going to spread it. But that could potentially be on the table. I don't know what their level of funding capability is, but we'll continue to work with them on that.
Amy? So, I am the director. I run the Lake Coast program here on Pawtuckaway. We had our training in April. The state park sent 5 employees to the Lake Coast training to go through the training so that they can talk to campers and visitors when they come in. They are actually looking at boats when if they're in the parking lot. They're handing out all of the Lake Coast thank you, it's my brain. Flyers and everything. And most specifically, they're telling campers on campsites, if there are markers, don't touch them and don't go near them, and try to just, not swim around them and boat around them, and, because we know that people have dragged them out of the way and things like that. So they are really working hard to inform and educate people coming into the park for use on what we are doing and why we are doing it.
I thought when we had the informational session with them on the expansion, I thought they committed to treating, with divers, an area, either the boat launch or the rental area. I thought they committed to that.
They did, but when I was out there a couple weeks ago, there was no milfoil there yet.
Okay.
So they want me to continue. They just actually checked in with me yesterday to see if I'd resurveyed, and I haven't yet. I will be soon. So if action is needed, I believe they're going to be ready to go.
There is milfoil there now.
There is, okay. All right, thank you. Yes.
Yes, when you treat the milfoil in a heavily dense area where you did this a lot, after you treat it, do you leave it there to die? Does that, with the rotting, would that affect the clarity of the water, or, rotting plants usually create murky water?
Yep. Yeah, so that's a really good question. If you think about it, every fall, all the plants, So after we do the herbicide treatment, do we just leave the plants there in place to die, or do we remove them? And the answer to the question is, we let them stay there. If you think about it, every single fall, all of the plants in your lake die anyways. So it's going to happen at some point. There's no value in going to remove the plants from where they're treated. The process is after treatment, the plants will start to look a little funky. They're going to start to degrade. And then by about 2 to 4 weeks post-treatment, you won't see them anymore. They're going to be completely gone from that area. The key is, and an add-on to this, is that when plants die, they consume the bacteria that break them down, consume oxygen. So we worry about oxygen loss in the water column, which could be an impact to fish. However, that's only if you treat very large areas, and we are not aiming to do that. Treatment sizes would be small, and you would have a big buffer around those zones where treatment is not happening. So there could be oxygen exchange in the water column to supplement where oxygen is being used up. And also, a lot of these areas are really shallow, so you're going to have oxygen mixing in from the atmosphere, and you're going to have a lot of other plants and algae that are there producing oxygen. So leaving plants there to die is not a concern. What they could do is a concern, but we mitigate that by keeping areas small.
Have I missed, have you said specifically which areas you're planning the herbicide for?
I have not stated that because I don't know. In the plan that's on the website, we delineated a bunch of areas where milfoil growth has occurred. Those are possible treatment zones, but only the ones that have the most dense growth. And I won't know that until I do a survey. So as soon as I survey, I will share that map with the Lake Association to share on the website so that everyone will know what I'm thinking about.
I didn't hear you mention anything about the possible side effects to fish or amphibians or other life.
Yep, so possible side effects to aquatic life and humans. We won't leave humans out of that because we're animals too. The herbicide is at dose in the water body, in the water column, not toxic to fish, amphibians, boons, other aquatic life. It's not, and humans. It's not a product that bioaccumulates in fat or muscle tissue. It's actually excreted through urine, so it's not going to build up in the body. And it is something that is at low concentration. So it is, like I said to an earlier question, you would have to drink more water than your body could hold to get the toxicity of this herbicide into your system or into the system of another organism. Because we treat it at a low dose, and the lethal concentration of this product is so very low that you would just have to consume straight herbicide, also beyond what you could physically hold in your body to achieve the toxicity to kill.
And you'd have to do it in the middle of the treatment zone within 24 to 48 hours before it's gone.
So,
and because it doesn't move anywhere, right?
So we would not use something that would cause a direct toxicity or a long-term toxicity to anything around the lake, human, animal, otherwise.
Small children included?
Small children included, yes. Yes.
Thank you for your nice presentation. Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to ask if you've been studying the Priscilla-core to see if milfoil develop resistance to it?
That's a really good question. So are we studying the herbicide to see if resistance is occurring? And that is a very valid question in aquatics. A lot of aquatic plants can become resistant to herbicides. The product hasn't shown any sign of causing resistance yet. And I think the significance is that we just don't need to use it that often on milfoil to cause that resistance. A lot of the milfoil that we have in New Hampshire is clonal. It's genetically identical. So there could be a high possibility of resistance as a result, but we just haven't seen that yet. And luckily, we haven't seen it with variable milfoil for any other product that we've used in the past, because we try to modify and alter what we're doing. It's that adaptive and integrated management, diving, treatment, other techniques. I didn't mention bottom barrier, which is like a fabric screening on the lake bottom. But that's only able to be used in really small areas because it can float up. But that's another technique we can use on some really stubborn areas.
Have you had an opportunity to see the video of the latest discovery over the town beach? And if you have, that dense enough to take the herbicide the way it is?
I unfortunately have not seen the video yet that was done of the milfoil at the town beach, but I can kind of see it screening over there. But I will definitely take a look at that, and that's also why I survey as well, is to see the density firsthand. Yep, but I'll take a look.
Bring it over, Tim. Everybody.
So when the question was, how long does it take? This is perfect. The question was, how long does it take for me to turn around a map to get it to you guys? The answer is at night. When I survey, I'll go out and I'll do the data processing at night and get that to you. So I should be able to get that at night to the next day. I don't know if I'm going to be able to run 2 teams to do half the lake each team to get the survey done in one day. If not, it might take me 2 days. This have a good sized lake. So it might take a little bit of time to get that survey done, but 1 or 2 days max, but hopefully the night that I finish the survey. I process all my own maps in GIS, so I can get that right out to you. I don't have to wait for someone to do that for me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Way in the back. Yep.
You said there's 100% funding this year, and also that there's different lakes have different infestations. Is there a percentage where you give up and say too much? Like, is there like a time frame?
Don't give up.
So I think that if there are some invested, and you're like, that's a certain percentage.
Yep, so that's a good question about funding. How do we break down those percentages, and do we just say no? So in the past, we used to say no. We used to strategize and prioritize water bodies and give out money until we had no more. Now, when we do planning, now when we do planning, I go out and I survey all of the water bodies. That's why I'm hard to reach during the day, because I'm on a boat somewhere. I do all the surveys, I recommend all the bids get put in, I see all the bids, and then I look at how much money the state has to give. I look at what is needed for the project. So we spend probably about $4 million a year on aquatic invasive plant management across all the water bodies and across all techniques. And I try to give as much as I can equally to each of the groups. We're able to fund every group every year. So lately I've been able to do a 50% match. So funding comes from boat registrations. It's $9.50 per boat registration that funds this program. We also lately got $200,000 a year from the state general fund, which was really hard to get, but some legislators recognized the need. And we were able to get that as well. So our budget is fixed. We have about $950,000 that comes in annually from boat registrations. And then we have about $200,000 from state general fund. 3/4 of that money goes right back out as grants. So we're able to give that, what we know, every year out. The problem is that as the number of water bodies continue to increase and need management, that pot isn't growing. So we are potentially going to have to start reducing the grant percent that we give out. But as long as I can, I'm going to try to do 50% grants, because the balance of that money comes from lake associations or municipalities, and the burden is high. So we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible. So a little scary situation right now is that the Coast Guard, the federal Coast Guard, has audited New Hampshire, and according to federal regulations, it's illegal to collect additional fees related to boat registration fees. So our funding is in jeopardy, but we have a study committee that is working to find solutions to that. And congressionally, we're working through Senator Shaheen's office to ask her to work on the federal level to change Coast Guard law or rule so that that part goes away. If we violate Coast Guard rule, it takes away money to the Department of Safety. So it's kind of a problem. So it's a little tough time right now, but hopefully that funding will stay in place and we'll be able to continue to give out those grants.
We all own the properties around this lake. The state essentially owns the water. I want to say that we have a partnership with the state. I'm listening to this, I think we have a totally unreasonable and irresponsible partner in the state because we are forced to allow boats to come in on our lake continuously. My boat does not go on another lake, and if it does, it would be washed. We know what this is. People down in Massachusetts come up, this is great. They just slipped in and to come in and bring this into our lake. And this is what the state is presenting us with. We're going to allow your lakes to be polluted. We're going to rely on science to come in and fix it for you. And maybe we'll find out 20 years from now that that wasn't a good idea. I'm disgusted with this entire situation. I think this is ridiculous. I think the structure is stupid. My wife's kicking me. So I have to stop. It's our agreement. We got married. So I'm done.
The checks and balances in marriage are wonderful. My husband and I have the same situation all worked out too. So yeah, I completely agree. The concern is that we're still allowing boat traffic on lakes across the state and moving invasive species. And yeah, I completely agree with you. When I see a new first infestation, it's at the boat launch first. I know where it's coming from. Unfortunately, the state is not going to stop access. I've tried to close water bodies for periods of time while we're trying to clean them up. And there is the charter to maintain our water bodies for use by all. People that live on them, people that like to travel and recreate on them. So unfortunately, that's a piece that's not going to change. I know that some lakes like yours have additional pressures from normal boat launches, but also state park pressure that brings in people from all over the place. And unfortunately, that's the playing field that we have to work in. So we have to try to have those layers of prevention and early detection in place so that we can help slow down the rate of spread, which we've done, but also the tools to be able to mitigate those problems once they're in there. I feel that same pressure as you, but it's not something that I can change, unfortunately. All right, I'm gonna continue to move around, then I'll come back to you.
I don't concede. You are conceding too. In this state, the structure is poorly set up. It's done and it's historic, and it does not meet where we are now. It's functionally obsolete. It's a dinosaur.
There are a lot of dinosaurs on the state level. There's honestly a lot of stuff that I would love to change, and I completely respect that. And I work for the state, so you had a question.
What are other options that are non-chemical? You know, we have divers. Somebody posted an article about UV treatment with a boat on another lake. What other non-chemical options do we have available to us?
So there's a lot of stuff that you can read on the internet that people like to advertise that will be the wonder cure for everything. Because I am a scientist and I'm grounded in science, I don't believe everything I read on the internet. So
University in Nevada, right? And their professor was doing research on a lake with UV equipped boat. So yes, I agree.
Yeah. So UV is a great technique. It can be used on smaller cell structure to break down viruses and bacteria. It's used in hospitals for smaller things like that. When you have, we get lots of UV light into our lakes from the sunlight anyways, and even when you concentrate that, it's not going to be strong enough to break down the cellular structure of aquatic plants. Even milfoil doesn't have a very complex cellular structure. But the concentrated UV isn't enough to achieve that. People have talked about using hydrogen peroxide and other products like that, and in small tank trials, and we do follow up on some of these things, in small tank trials, they're just not effective. I am happy to step up the diver-assisted suction harvesting because it's a technique that's been proven as effective, and we can see if we're making headway for the next several weeks going out. But I am involved in regional and national and international organizations that specialize in aquatic plant management, and the techniques that we use here are the ones that have been proven effective, and a lot of these other things that are advertised just unfortunately aren't. They're just not strong enough. They don't target the root systems of the plants to get rid of the roots. So you really do need to get rid of the shoot and the root as well. So either physically or chemically are the ways right now at least to do it. There are biological controls out there that can be used, but unfortunately nothing that's specific to milfoil. When we had purple loosestrife declines in the state from the late 90s through probably 2015, that was the result of a biocontrol. But biocontrols are dangerous in themselves because you want to have almost that perfect predator that would rather die than eat anything else but what you wanted to eat. And trying to achieve that is difficult. I mean, it's a funny concept. It's very sci-fi, but it works in some situations. Agriculture uses it all the time. But the research to get there is, that purple loosestrife beetle, it took 10 years at Cornell to find something out of 122 bugs that would rather die than eat something else, and they found 3 out of 122. So the science is continually looking at it, but from what I have in the toolbox right now is what works.
There's a question over here.
Yeah.
Couple things. Real quick, thank you for all your years of service to this lake, because you've been doing this for a long time, and I think you know this water you want, but
don't retire on us.
I have a kid in college, I'm not retiring.
My question is, if you had to make a decision today on the best way to treat this body of water, knowing what you know about it, what would that decision be? I know you haven't done a full survey of the lake today as it stands, but based off the map you already have, in your opinion, what is the best way to make this lake as best as we can, get as clean as we can? And what is the cost after grants, this year the state is going to pay for it, well, what is the cost to us as an association or lake the years after that potentially? Good cost.
So best scenarios I've already laid on the table. Diving, dash, and herbicide are the best options for you right now. In terms of what I will use will be dependent on, or what I would recommend to use would be dependent on a survey. Cost of management, herbicide treatment is about $2,000 per acre. The diving is diver-assisted suction harvesting is about $2,000 a day, not an acre, but $2,000 a day, and they're not clearing anywhere near an acre, so it's much more expensive. But, I mean, additively, we'd have to see what the acreage is and what the size and scale is to know the cost. I'll share the cost with you this year. More questions?
Thank you. I want you to take Jamie's question.
That's
all he's got to do.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's our principal diver.
You just said that funding, they can't increase the fees for boat registration.
Yep.
What would it take to change the state laws about having an access fee to actual lakes, where when people come, they actually have to pay to enter a body of water they don't live in? And I understand that would be a state level thing. We reach out to our Congress, and maybe that would deter some of these people who have to pay $25 to come to our lake and throw it in, because that funding would go directly to the invasive species.
Okay, thank you for the question, and it's nice to put a face with a name. We've only been texting and talking on the phone, so thank you. So it's not that we can't increase boat registration fees. We can, and we have over the years. We started off with $3 per boat registration fee. We just try not to go back to that every time. But a user fee is a potential option. I don't think we've explored that in the legislature yet. We've looked at fees for kayaks, which got killed twice because it's highly unpopular. And you got to just work these things through the legislature and see what the feel is there. So, I mean, certainly that's an option that could be explored.
Well, just think that if the lakes with the invasive species actually cost money to come into, you might deter them to go somewhere else.
Oh, the state park.
Out-of-staters that come to our state parks,
They have to pay additional because it will help with maintaining the lake.
Yeah, an add-on to that was adding on to the visitors to the state parks. I do want to let you know that we did recently add an out-of-state boater decal fee. So boaters that have boats that they bring in that are registered in a state other than New Hampshire do have to buy a $20 decal to fund activities related to invasive species. The revenues of that so far are small because we had no idea what out-of-state boat well, we didn't know what the number of those people was going to be. So it's a little bit of money coming in, but yeah, that's certainly something we can explore. There is a standing invasive species committee in New Hampshire that meets monthly to talk about ideas, and I can certainly bring that one to the table. It's a combination of state legislators, agency staff, and appointed members of the public that are interested in lakes and other things, rivers. So yeah, it's a forum to discuss these types of things. So thank you for that idea.
One more, way back there.
To collect the herbicide residue sampling. So they've used AquaServe out of the southern part of the state, and I believe they also use Granite State Analytical. Yep.
Okay, well, this is amazing, folks. First of all,
Steve, can I ask one more thing?
you can do whatever you want because you're a weed watcher.
Early on, you mentioned that the 2 windows of opportunity are like June and August. So given that the milfoil grows an inch a day, and it's getting toward the surface of the water, where it gets chopped up and makes babies to go everywhere, what are your thoughts on the risk of waiting that extra 6 weeks till the August timeframe?
So yeah, the risk of waiting to do an herbicide treatment is just that. You're going to have the plant that could get bigger and continually spread around the lake that's standing in big stands unmanaged or not adequately managed. So yeah, and another thing to add is that I prefer to treat in the spring when biomass is small and you don't have as much decomposition happening. So that's why we try to treat May, June, ideally, rather than August. But August is another window. The plant has already grown and potentially flowered, and you're hitting it at a weakened point in August. So it is a window. We try to do most of our treatments in the spring for that reason of fragmentation and spread, but also lower biomass. So it's more ideal, but not necessary.
Okay, one of the things, when I began here a long time ago, we activated the weed watchers, and one of the things we discovered as a weed watcher is we had a patron saint, which was Amy. Come over here. So the first thing we did when we reconstituted the weed watchers is, does anyone remember the Twin Islands? Yeah. Do you remember when there was a third island between them? No. There was. It was actually Phragmites. And Amy went out there on Kotowski's boat and said, look, you got to get rid of it. So we've been pulling Phragmites and other things as weed watchers. So I wanted to, since you helped us reconstitute, this is a second generation t-shirt from the Weed Watchers.
I still have
See the Twin Islands. Anyways, let's hear it for Amy, and thank you very much.